The engineers at the FOXAlien manufacturers had done something absolutely unique and special. Yes, that's right, they're making a hot wire CNC machine. As I open up this box, you're going to find that everything is packed extremely neat and careful. Now this is actually 2 layers. I'm going to go ahead and pull this out, set it on the table so that you can see everything. As with many of the products by FOXAlien, a lot of this machine is pre-assembled. The belts are already on, major components are already put together, and that's going to make the assembly much easier. Now that I've got everything out of the box and laid out onto the workbench, you can see everything. You have a brand new controller that comes with it. The stepper motors, other than the Z-axis, are all assembled. The belts are installed. Everything is there. And this is a very complete package. And this is definitely different and unlike any other CNC machine that you put together. But it still is very straightforward, and it goes together rather quickly and easily. And of course you do have a detailed manual to be able to help you put this together, complete with all of the pictures that you need to be able to help the assembly and the detailed instructions. In addition, you also have a guide for the different types of foam that you can cut, and based on the thickness, it will give you the speed and the voltage to use. Now keep in mind, that's a starting point, because as with any hot wire cutter, it definitely will make a difference with the temperature that you're cutting and the thickness of the foam. So there is a trial and error. But as you look back at this manual, you can see that it's very detailed. On the first step, there's several things you want to make sure. The base profile for the front and the back. The front bar is going to have wires attached to it already, and on the back, it does not. And as far as the left and right, this is going to be your X2. You can verify that right here on the stepper motor. So I'm going to lay that out just like this. And on the X1, on the base profile, you have your limit switches on here. And you also have marked on the stepper motor the X1. So it's very important to have this laid out correctly before you start assembling it. To assemble the base, you're going to need 8 of these M520 that's included in the kit. Now these are the hex head screws that come with the kit. On this base profile, you need to make sure that you attach this in the correct order. This wire will actually come down and out on this front end. And you also have 2 holes that are drilled and tapped right here. That's a little bit off center. So that needs to be oriented in this manner. And I'll go ahead and attach it right here using the 2 holes that are provided. As I start to assemble this, you see this little bitty yellow tag. It shows that the Y-axis is going vertical and the X-axis is going horizontal. This is going to be important. Keep that in mind. Now this should be down at this bottom right-hand corner. And you also see right where those 2 lines meet is the home position, which is going to be at the bottom left-hand side of this tag. Again, remember, everything's going to be different. On the back base, you want to make sure the same thing. You have these 2 holes that are drilled and tapped, and they're going to be off center. So it's going to be over this direction. So it's going to be oriented this way. Now it's important to note that once you have everything oriented correctly, yes, you can go ahead and put all of the screws in. And please remember, I'm only loosely putting these screws in right now. Once I have it all together and square, then I'll tighten them. Now I mentioned that wire on this front piece. That wire actually is for an LED light, and you can see that light strip right there. This is actually very important because when that wire is hot, this LED light is going to be on, and it gives you a visual warning that that wire is extremely hot and do not touch it. Now since this is a hot wire cutter, you don't need glasses because this is not a laser. But that wire that actually is cutting the foam is very hot. And so it is dangerous, and you do have to be very careful not to get burned. And I'm going to discuss this in more detail later in the video. In the next step, we're going to go ahead and add the feet. Now these feet are quite substantial compared to some of the other CNC machines that are out there. And you also have these M510s that are used in conjunction with the installation of these feet. So next, we're going to go ahead and flip over this machine and we're going to attach these feet. And I want to give you a quick close-up look at the bracket that's already pre-attached. And this is the bracket that we're going to be using to be able to attach the feet and that M510 screw. And it's going to be located right here, and there's one on each of the corners. Inside this base is a little T-nut that's already in position. You will have to slide it, perhaps left and right, to be able to align it to this hole to be able to put in this M5 screw. Once you have it aligned, then yes, it'll go in quite easily. And again, nothing is tight at this point because I want to make sure that I can get the machine completely square. Now I'm going to take one of the feet and it will screw in right here. Now I'm just barely snugging that up, and what it's doing is coming down to the base and just touching it, and then I'll tighten this nut. I still have access to this, so I can tighten it. And again, I'm leaving this loose also. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process now for the other three. Now you can see down in the side of here, that's not quite aligned. So I just need to slide that T-nut over just a little bit, and then I can drop this screw in and tighten it. Again, it's just barely snug. Then I'll go ahead and screw the leg in down to where it just touches, and I'll tighten this down. It's time now to go ahead and check for square. I want this base perfectly square. So this is 745 millimeters, and we'll check it the other direction, and that is 744.5. So that is very, very close. So if I move this just a tad that way, that should do it, and I'll be able to go ahead and tighten these. I went ahead and adjusted everything. I'm coming back now that it's tight and double checking it. And this is 745 exactly. And if I come over to this side, and I can measure it, and it's 745 exactly. So this frame now is perfectly square. I've got these screws already tightened. I still will flip it over and tighten this screw on these four corners. The next part that we need to install is this rotary axis profile. It too will get installed with the M5 30 millimeter bolts. Now this gets mounted underneath. So again, I'm going to flip the machine over and put this on. Now there's two things you need to be careful with. The LED light strip that has the wire there, you need to be careful and not damage that when you screw this on. The second thing you need to be cautious with is make sure that you have this scale correct. The 0 needs to be toward the LED strip. The next thing we're going to assemble are these clamp profiles. Now the clamp actually needs to go onto this. And these are the clamps right here that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slide these on. And these have the little T-nuts down here at the bottom. So I'm going to unscrew this, loosen that up. And then I'll be able to slide that right into its position. And that will slide in just like that. Then I can go ahead and tighten that down. Now this is the second one that I'm sliding on, and it just slips right in. That T-slot works perfect. And then I can just go ahead and tighten it. Now there's two clamps on each of these bars. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process and put the clamps on this second bar. The next thing that needs to happen is this needs to attach into here. You have these little T-nuts that we're going to be able to slide so that this can get positioned exactly where it needs to be. And of course you see the holes here that are drilled. And this is the screw that we're going to be using right here. It's the M416. And this needs to be slid down and aligned right on the 1 centimeter line. So right there is where it needs to be. I'll repeat this process with the second bar using the screws and just aligning it with the T-nuts that are already installed. Now this one can be positioned anywhere. It's nice having the T-nuts already in position. Now this bar, as I just said, can be positioned anywhere. This bar will slide left and right depending on the material that we're going to be cutting with the hot knife. So for now, I'm just going to put it here, and this will be as good as any. For the most part, this is directly in the center of the CNC machine. It may be a little bit hard to see now, but these two bars and these clamps actually hold the material that we're going to be cutting. The next part that we have to put in is this Gantry Profile. Now this is the profile on the y-axis 1, so that will go right over here, and that will slide right in here. Now you have 2 screw holes right here, and you have the 2 screw holes right here that are tapped for the threads, and you're going to be using the M530s to put this in. The nice thing about this, it does have the slot for this to slide in, so there's no real need to have to worry about getting it plumb, because it's going to do that for you. And on this, yes, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this. You want to make sure that this part is facing forward. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. This is a close-up of the installation of those 2 screws, and it just slides into that slot and they lock in place. So this is very, very simple, and there's really no guesswork with this. Now the last thing that goes in is the beam itself. Now this beam also has these little T-nuts at each end, so it just literally flips over and will drop right in place. You have two of the M5 10mm screws that will go in there. This bar maintains its stability and makes sure that the vertical bars remain parallel. Now the wire will need to go from here, and it will be tied off here at this point. It'll go up over this one, down to this, which will go underneath, then it'll go straight across. On the opposite side, it'll come back underneath, up and over this, and then tie off right there with this screw. In preparation to run the resistant wire, you have to look at this. This has 2 ceramic rings. One is black and one is white. Now I'm going to go ahead and loosen this up a little bit because the wire will need to fit between those 2. And that's very important to be able to keep it insulated so that the heat will be able to transfer through the wire properly. The other thing is, in the instructions it says cut a 70mm stretch of wire. Now I'm just going to simply push this wire through there, up, and just tie it off. Nothing real fancy about that. So once I have this wire attached, I'm going to go ahead and screw it back into the vertical rod. Now it's important to note, this is the knob that you're going to be able to use to adjust the tension on this wire. You want to be able to have the wire tight, but not overly tight. And as this metal heats, this wire will stretch some. So you have to be aware of that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and screw this in. You do have a lock nut that you can lock to be able to hold it tight. To run the wire now, I'm just going to go ahead and put it over on top, and again, remember, between the black and the white ceramic rings. Underneath this other one, and then I'll stretch it across to the other side. Again, I'm going to run the wire underneath this point, over on top of the other ceramic rod, and then over to this screw. Now, in hindsight, I should have went ahead and attached a spring with the ceramic rod to it, but I didn't do that. But this way I'll at least hold it so the wire's not going to fall off until I attach the spring with the ceramic ring on that. I want you to learn from the mistake on this. The instructions said cut the wire 70mm, so there was really no guesswork. That way you could attach one end to that little knob that's going to control the tension, and then you could attach the spring to the other end. And that actually would have made it a whole lot easier to be able to do it. But at this point, I've already cut the wire, so I'm going to attach the ceramic ring to it, and then I'm going to just put the spring onto this screw. And that will take care of it. But this is a lot harder than doing it the way the instructions said. Lesson learned. Now these screws need to be tight, but not to put tension on the wire. This wire has to be flexible so that it will bend and move when you're actually using the hot wire and cutting the foam. So the goal here is to tighten the screws, but not so tight as to pinch this wire. This wire still has to be able to move around this ceramic ring. On this side, again, you have this knob that you'll be able to control the tension. So if you need to loosen the knob and tighten it, you'll be able to do so. Good, this wire will stretch during the cutting process. The easiest way to set up this wiring harness is just to go ahead and lay it out. If you look at it from this angle, this is the cable for the Z-axis, and that stepper motor is going to actually screw in right here. But for now, I want to concentrate on these two. This is your X-axis on your X2 axis and your Y2 axis, and you have the cables right here for that. The red wire is to come right up this bar, and it will attach to the resistance wire. On the other side, you have your X for your one axis and your X1 for your Y axis. You have all the cables here clearly labeled. You also have the limit switches, and the limit switches are right here, and we'll plug those in. Now the red wire is going to be attached to this end of the resistance wire, and it'll come right up this vertical bar. It's time to be able to go ahead now. Let's get everything plugged in. So this is the Y on the 2 axis. This is my Y2 axis, so I'll go ahead and plug that in. And this is my X2 axis, and here is the cable for that right there, X2 axis. So I'll plug it in. And now it's time to go ahead and run the red wire up. Now the cable ties came with this CNC machine also, and this little clip to be able to hold the zip tie and the wire was already pre-mounted. The resistance wire connects us right here with a zip tie. Then it comes all the way up to the top, and we'll have another zip tie right here, and it then comes over to this one, and it attaches right there to the resistance wire. Now you have to have this excess cord so that when it moves up and down, you have enough of that cable to be able to work on the full range of motion. On this side, we'll take the Y1. Have the Y1 axis right here, and I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. Then we'll take the X-axis one, and we'll plug it in. We'll verify the wiring, and then we'll plug that in. And we have these two wires for the X home and for the Y home. All right, so I'm going to take this right here, which is the Y home, and we'll go ahead and plug that one in. We'll take the X home and plug it in right here. And we'll do the same thing with the red wire for the resistance wire. I also want to show you how to hook up the Z-axis. You have two holes right here that are tapped, and the stepper motor is going to attach right here at this point. The screws that you're going to use to attach the stepper motor are these M4 16s. Okay, I plugged in the Z-axis, and at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten these screws down. Then we'll put this right down on top. And that does give the clearance. Then I would just need to tighten the set screw underneath there. Now this is the rotary platform that you'll use to be able to cut three-dimensional objects. If you're not doing that, then you can just remove it, and then you'll use these clamps. So I'll bring this back to my 20. And I can actually take a sample piece of the foam And go ahead and put this in here. And that needs to be set right here at this point. Now this is a sample piece of foam that came with the CNC, and it does set vertical. See, that gets set right here, flush with that, and I'll tighten it down. And then over on this section, I'll just simply slide this over and secure it. And that takes care of the mounting of my project board. I want to show you the controller and some important features on this. Of course, on the back of it, you're going to have all of the different connections that are clearly labeled, and we're going to be plugging these in just a moment. Right here, you have a connector for the resistance wire. That's going to be that red wire, and of course, that's going to be for your power. And you have the off and on switch here. One of the most important things, if you're in the United States, you got to make sure that you put this on the 110. If you're in other parts of the world, I'm sure you're going to be using the 220. But please check and make sure, based on the power that you have in your shop or in your garage that you're using, that you have this set correctly. Now, turning around again on the front, you have the USB port, and you have, should you have one, the offline controller. You have the connector right there. On top, you have this off and on button right here, and this controls the actual voltage, and the voltage will be displayed on this little screen. Now we're going to start out with about 25 volts, so I'll turn that over to this point, and this will display the 25 volts. You also have the e-stop right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug these in. This is the little LED. I'll plug in right there. Next is the Y home. So Y home will be right here. Next is the X home. I like the way they have these laid out because it makes it where they go in order. Next should be the Z axis. And next is going to be the Y1. And let's get the resistant wire plugged in. There we go. So everything is connected now. A quick look at the limit switches. They do operate differently if they're tripped. You'll actually see a little light that will set off to show you what triggered. And that will be on these little panels right here. So please be aware of that. You're going to get a different type of indicator. Moving on to the software now to operate this machine is actually very, very simple. Now in the kit, it does come with the thumb drive. And on the thumb drive, you have the universal G-code sender, and you also have Inkscape. And of course, you have some test files. Now, I already have the UGS, or the universal G-code sender, and I also have the Inkscape on my computer. So from that standpoint, I'm not going to be downloading it from this thumb drive, but it is available. It is very convenient and very easy to be able to do it. When you open the universal G-code sender, or UGS, this is the screen that you're going to get. Now this is an older version, and there are several versions that you can choose from. This is just the one that I happen to use, but they're all basically the same. Now the first thing you're going to want to make sure of is have the COM port selected. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure the COM port is selected. On mine, it's going to be a COM 5. You also want this set at the 115-200. And you have the Gerbil setting. When you click open, this is the next section that you're going to see. And the first thing you want to be able to do is come down here, and you're going to see that it is connected to the COM 5 with this bond setting. So I need to go ahead and unlock this. So by clicking the little dollar sign and the X, that opens this up to the point where we can actually move it now. If I slide over to the other side of the screen, you can see where I can actually move this, because I have this set in the machine controls. And right now it's set for millimeters and 10 millimeters to be exact. So I can click on this and it will move up the 10 millimeters. And I can go back down the same way. So what I want to do is come up a little bit higher to right there at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and reset my X and reset my Y. By clicking the reset X axis and the reset for the Y axis, that creates the home position, or I should say the work home position. I want to go ahead now and add a file to this, and I'm going to use the test file from the thumb drive. So this is the FOX0001.nc. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And I want to visualize this. I'm going to click on the visualize button. And this is what it should be cutting out. So I know this is the file that I want. I know this is my start point right here. And it's going to go ahead and cut in. And it's going to cut all of this out. So at this point, all I need to be able to do is hit send. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn my resistant wire on, and then we'll hit send. Okay, it successfully cut it out, but you can see that it's a little bit distorted. And the reason being is that wire was getting hot and it was moving too much. So I literally need to have the tension set where it's tighter on there so it does not have as much movement. Now I raised it up to this point. I did tighten the wire again, and I want to cut this one more time. That's looking much better. So you can see how important it is to be able to have the tension correct on this wire. And that completes it. That looks fantastic. And what I can do now, I'm going to turn this off because this red is still on. That is very, very hot. And that will just pop right out. And there it is. That is what I'm looking for. Another test file that they have on this thumb drive is the file of an eagle. So I'm going to go ahead and test this one now, and we're going to cut this out of the same piece of foam. What I did is just turn the foam on its side because I want the eagle to cut out in this area. Now right now the wire, you can probably not see this in the camera, but the wire is right here. I'm going to lower it back down to this point, and then I'm going to reset my X, my Y axis, and then the eagle will cut out in this area. Now I'm going to leave this in the view of the camera because you're not going to really be able to see the wire that runs right here. So you'll be able to see this when I move it down, and then I'll reset it. So that's the point that I'm going to set it. Now I'm going to set my X and my Y axis. So that will be my new work home position. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the resistance wire and hit send. So you can see the red light is now on. This is my red LED light, and that indicates that that wire is now hot. All that's left to do is hit send. And that completes it. It doesn't take long. I'm going to turn off my heating element or my resistance wire, and this little eagle will just fall right out. So there is the eagle profile. This turned out absolutely amazing, and I love the tests that I was able to do with this. So just keep in mind, when you're working with this machine, or quite frankly, any CNC, you do have to make tests and find out what the best setting is. And with the hot wire machine, having that tension on the wire correct is critical, as you could see in the video. Now in the upcoming videos, I'm going to be using the Inkscape to be able to do the designs and create the G-code to be able to run on this hot wire CNC machine. So you're not going to want to miss out on that. So please, by all means, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And don't forget to hit the little bell notification next to it so that you'll be notified when I upload those videos. So until next time, I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in whatever videos that I'm doing.